We announced the unsealing of sex trafficking charges against Jeffrey Epstein. The charges allege that Epstein sexually abused young girls by enticing them to engage in sex acts for money. Epstein is charged in a two-count indictment. First, conspiracy to commit sex trafficking, and second, the substantive crime of sex trafficking of underage girls. We think
over the weekend, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested coming from essentially in the airport on sex trafficking charges. Now, this is a billionaire, a politically connected billionaire, a registered sex offender billionaire. Welcome to the Soapbox. This gets deep. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. This video will be immediately demonetized, which kind of leads me into a nice segue of, if you enjoy the content and you find yourself coming back here often, please consider supporting this content through PayPal or Patreon. Even $1 helps, because videos like this will not get any funding for it. But let's do the news. Jeffrey Epstein. So Jeffrey Epstein, as I said before, was picked up from the airport. Now, this federal attorney, U.S. attorney, is laying out his case and why he was picked up. And what it boils down to, I'm going to give a brief summary of this, and I'm going to leave some articles just to go further into it. But Jeffrey Epstein is a registered sex offender. He's a billionaire financier. Part of the reason this story has gotten such airplay is because he's politically connected. Those political connections go as high as Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. You heard the U.S. attorney laying out some of this case, but what it boils down to is Epstein will get young women as young as 14 to give him massages. And those massages will get overtly sexual. And in addition to being overtly sexual, he'll pay them hundreds of dollars to do these massages that turn sexual and turn eventually into sex. But he would also go further in asking them to point him in the direction of any other women that may want to get involved in this, or young girls that want to get involved in this scheme of sorts. This went on for several years. There's no statute of limitations for some of the issues that have taken place, meaning they can go after him. He had been picked up once before. Epstein had been picked up once before. And he gets a sweetheart deal that allowed him only to serve a year in prison, all of it, or most of that being work release, with an NPR agreement that protected him from federal charges. Now, the people who were his victims didn't get a say in this. And they didn't get a hearing on this, meaning they didn't know about what the state attorney, Acosta, who is now Donald Trump's Secretary of Labor Secretary. He didn't, and so there's a fight over this, meaning this is being contested because the victims didn't know about this, and the victims want this essentially to be overthrown. They want this thrown out. Of course, you can imagine that his attorneys don't want this to be thrown out. The U.S. attorney here, that's in the background, is also making a secondary argument that he's a flight risk. And a third argument that not only a flight risk, that he's gone so far as to intimidate some of the witnesses. Now, it's hard to know whether he's intimidated the witnesses. That's one of those things you get hashed out in trial, and he would have to make an argument for it and present the evidence for it. And whether he's a flight risk or not, he's a billionaire, and he has tons of resources to get him from point A to point B. I think that's the basic argument on this. I don't know why that's not a decent argument. That's an extraordinarily good argument. If you often make the argument that a person who's poor is a flight risk and that person needs to be put in prison, that a person who's a billionaire with all sorts of resources definitely fit the mold of a flight risk. So that argument has legs. The interesting part here, though, is the sex swing part and whether or not people knew. Look at this. This is a tweet from Tim O'Brien, Trump's biographer. I think it's Trump's biographer, but I could be wrong. But I think it's Trump's biographer. I think it's Trump's biographer. Author of Trump Nation. Okay. This is what Trump said. I've known Jeffrey for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It's even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. Donald Trump back in 2002. Did they know? Did Bill Clinton know? These guys were friends. These guys were friends. And then you get into, this notion of people like Harvey Weinstein. And this guy was a Democratic contributor. And you ask the basic question again, did they know? Bill Clinton hung around these guys. Donald Trump hung around these guys. Did they know? Now, they're alleging that this was taking place in Florida and New York. Now, one of the contentions here that the lawyers raise for Epstein is, well, wait a minute, you're rehashing an old case. The problem here is that the case beforehand, that NPR agreement that these guys were able to put in that sealed this, and that kept this only to 1 year and so forth, and that kept the federal authorities from hitting him, only was for Miami. It was a limited range, meaning the fact that these took in multiple locations of Manhattan and Florida means that he is still liable to be subject to be charged. Not just that, in the raid recently, these authorities were pulled out, apparently they say, a shocking amount. I think that was the quote. An extraordinary volume of photographs featuring nude or partially nude young girls was confiscated from the New York City home of Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein is going to have a lot to answer for. Let's hear what the attorney is saying on this. He came out with this morning. I saw this when it first came out, and I was like, oh my God, wow. Because this guy's politically connected. And before I get to that, look at what Pelosi's daughter said. Pelosi's daughter put out an amazing tweet. Right here. The Epstein case is horrific and young women deserve justice. It's quite likely that some of our faves are implicated, but we must follow the facts that let the chips fall where they may, whether Republican or Democrat. Why is she saying that? She's saying that because she knows this guy is politically connected. He's a billionaire financier, but he also involves himself into politics. And like I said, Trump and Clinton are connected, meaning he's been connected on both Republican and Democratic sides. It is possible that this investigation, that by the way, is still going on, that this investigation starts pulling out people that may be in politics. The reason why this is getting such airfare and such attention is because there may be other people that are in the Democratic and Republican Party that are sweating bullets right now. It is hard to know where this investigation goes, and this investigation may start implicating political figures. Are you telling me that nobody knew? Are you telling me that nobody knew? And not just nobody knew, are you telling me that none of his friends partook of some of those massages, that weren't put in contact with some of those kids, some of those children to get those massages? It was a sex ring. The question is, who else was involved in that sex ring? This is somewhat of an astonishing case. It really is. Let me go into specifics. I just wanted to give an overview of details of what was going on. Epstein, 66, is accused of seeking out minors, some as young as 14, from 2002 through 2005, and paying them hundreds of dollars in cash for sex at either Manhattan townhouse or his estate in Palm Beach, Florida. He is charged with 1 count of sex trafficking conspiracy and 1 count of sex trafficking. He faces up to 45 years in prison if found guilty. Federal prosecutor Alex Ross Miller is arguing against granting him bail, told the judge Epstein is extraordinarily wealthy and a flight risk because he has the means to flee. He also accused Epstein of witness intimidation, including forcing off the road the father of one of the victims. That's the thing I mentioned earlier. The decision on bail was delayed, and he must remain in bars at least until Thursday. So I mentioned that part. He would ask his victims for massages and then kind of get heavily further into sex. Epstein, a hedge fund manager who has powerful political connections, include President Donald Trump and former President Bill Clinton, was arrested without incident at an airport in Teterboro, New Jersey, on Saturday after flying from Paris. His arrest is part of a larger investigation by the Southern District of New York's Public Corruption Unit, Multiple people briefed on the matter earlier told NBC News. My point is, they're still looking. It's a further investigation. The investigation hasn't stopped. So in the first case, Epstein was able to make a non-prosecution agreement with prosecutors in 2008 that allowed him to dodge more serious charges by federal authorities and prosecution and potential life sentence. Instead, Epstein pleaded guilty to state charges of procuring a person under 18 for prostitution and felony solicitation of prostitution, which required him to register as a sex offender and serve about a year in prison. Or serve about a year in jail, most of it in work release. The deal was widely criticized as too lenient and worked out by his attorneys. Epstein accusers, who were not told of the agreement in 2008 in advance, are suing to have it thrown out. They're saying that, look, we weren't told. We were supposed to be told. You didn't tell us. We're trying to get this thrown out. In which case, it can make him open and susceptible to being re-prosecuted or recharged. Now, people can scream double jeopardy on this, but in their cases, they're looking at this as this guy took advantage of us and we want to prosecute him. They were children. In February, a federal judge ruled that Florida prosecutors, led by Acosta, that's Trump's friend, had violated federal law by failing to notify the accusers of the agreement, meaning opening him up to prosecution. So this is going to be fought in court, that specific issue. However, he is still susceptible to charges in New York because even under the agreement that he filled out or signed, that was only a limited range of victims, meaning victims that were in a specific location. You get a pass on later on. However, that does not give victims a pass in New York. And he was flying back and forth between the two. All right. And this here, I'm not going to keep this one much longer. I just wanted to give a heads up on this because this was big news today, and this was somewhat of a big deal. And we're going to be hearing more about this because we have no idea who else is going to fall out of the tree as the authorities continue to hit this. It's a child sex ring. This guy's politically connected. Weinstein, child sex, or not child sex, but essentially abusing women in this case, and again, politically connected. And you ask the question, with all of these political connections and all of these guys rubbing elbows, are we to believe that nobody else knew? I'll leave it here. Thanks all.